Public service was never intended to create a separate class of Americans. Yet many people today wonder whether or not government has become something of a members only club, designed for everyone except the people it was meant to serve. So, why is it so many Americans believe there is an insider class? Is it perception based on facts? Is it frustration or maybe something in between? Today, we're here to ask whether our institutions are still earning the public's trust and what it would take to restore confidence while preserving the freedoms that make America unique. Join the conversation and tell us what you think. Has public service changed or has public perception changed? The conversations many never hear starts here because the questions we ask mean the story isn't over.
We can still believe, 'cause BossMan is on the
And the story continues. Broadcasting for the American dream, built on faith, sustained by freedom, because the story isn't over. Public service. When most people hear those two words, different images come to mind, obviously. Many of you think of the firefighter who runs toward danger while everyone else is running away. Perhaps you think of the police officer working the midnight shift. Maybe you're the apathetic type of human and think of the paramedic arriving when someone has the worst day of their life. Whichever of those things you thought of, you're not wrong. But whatever you may have thought of, here's the thing about that. For generations, most of us think that's what public service meant. It was people who don't ask, what's in it for me? It's for people who don't expect fame and fortune. They want to know how to help. Just service, nothing else. Now, let's fast forward to today. When you hear the words public service today, do you still picture sacrifice? Or has that phrase come to mean something different in today's world? Does your mind immediately go to career politicians, perhaps? Perhaps you think of lobbyists. Maybe the only word in your mind is influence. If that's happened, the real question isn't who to blame. The question is, when did the meaning change? See, words matter because when the meaning of a word changes, sometimes the culture changes with it. If public service once meant sacrifice, and today many Americans associate it with power and privilege, maybe the conversation we need isn't about politics at all. Maybe it's about trust. Trust is an interesting thing. It isn't usually lost because of one event. It erodes over time. One headline, one controversy. Whether those questions involve Republicans or Democrats or neither of the two, every one of them leaves Americans wondering the same thing. Is everyone really playing by the same rules?
Legislation efforts are underway to pass the Pelosi Act. It's aimed to bar members of Congress and their spouses from stock trading while in office and getting filthy rich like she and her husband did. That wouldn't make the former speaker and her husband, Paul, too happy, as you might imagine. They're estimated to have seriously cashed in with their stock deals since she's been in Congress. So much so that there are even social media accounts that try to track their moves. Republican Senator Josh Hawley sided with Democrats to block a review of the anti-stock trading bill. The president's not happy about that, calling him a second-tier senator. Here's Hawley's response last night on Primetime.
This bill will cover not only her, it will cover her husband. And the point is, we need to make it illegal for people to do this kind of thing. 86% of Americans look at stock trading by members of the Congress and they say, we ought to ban that. They can't believe it's not been banned already. Nobody should be up in Congress making a quick buck day trading.
Stories like this certainly don't help. You know, what you just saw there really caught my attention. But if this were just one story, we probably forget about it in a few weeks and we'd be done with it. But we don't, because the question surrounding public trust didn't begin with that story, and they won't end with it either. And this is where the conversation gets bigger than just one story. It gets bigger than one story, one person, or for that matter, even one party. Because according to Jason Saul, only 18% of people in this country trust the government. Think about it. 18%.
18%? That's scary. How can we possibly sustain our way of life if we don't believe in our own government? And globally, that statistic isn't very different. Only 14% of people trust their national governments around the world. So why is trust so low? Well, there's two competing explanations. The first is, it's all about the people. It's about the political leadership. Well, it's all about this guy. It's Donald Trump's fault. That's why we don't trust government. But the data doesn't support that. In fact, trust was lower during certain times in the Obama administration than it is in the Trump administration. And all throughout history, Democrat to Republican, Republican to Democrat, trust continues to decline, other than a temporary spike during 9/11.
Now, let what he just said sink for just a second. Just think about it, okay? What he said, that's actually pretty rich, really. Don't you think? I mean, that means something. That means this isn't just some fringe complaint from the corner of the room. This is a majority level problem in the public mind. And what makes it even more interesting is the number is not very far from the global average he cites in the clip you just watched. Personally, I find that very telling, because numbers like these don't belong to just Republicans or Democrats. They belong to the American people. Think about it. Looking at this graph, he goes on to provide context. I think it's interesting. 25 years, okay? Different presidents, different parties, yet the same question keeps coming back around. Why hasn't trust recovered? Because if trust has remained this low across multiple administrations, then this conversation can't honestly be reduced to Republican versus Democrat. Or just because one scandal got more coverage than another. There's something far deeper going on here. Something structural, something Americans have felt building for so long. Maybe that's why the phrase insider class hits the ear the way it does. Not because of corruption, and not because of the name Pelosi or whatever. Not because every public servant has bad intentions, but because many Americans look at the system and wonder whether access, influence, money, and connections have all become more powerful than merit. When people start believing that, the American dream starts to take a hit every single time. Because the American dream depends on one basic fundamental belief, and that ordinary people still have a fair shot. Not a guaranteed outcome. By far, not always that. But a fair shot. A belief that if you work, if you build, if you sacrifice, learn, and you keep getting up every time life knocks you down, you can move your life forward. But if people begin to believe the real road to success runs through political access, if they begin to believe that the rules are different depending on who you know, then the issue is no longer just corruption. It becomes competence. It becomes whether or not citizens believe the system's worthy of their trust. Confidence that the American dream still belongs to ordinary, everyday Americans willing to earn it. I keep thinking back to those clips we looked at earlier. And one was a headline, the other a statistic. And yet another reminded us that conversations about freedom and public trust aren't unique to just this country. They're happening in other countries too. Each one wrestling with many of the very same questions we deal with every single day. One story lasted a few days. One trend has lasted more than 25 years. So that's the difference. Headlines come and go. The same with administrations. They also come and go. Trust, not so much. Trust doesn't come back nearly as easy. If trust has to be earned, what should earning it actually look like? Think about that for a minute. And I'd like to know if you agree. Some say earning trust has to begin in Washington, but I wonder if it has to begin much closer to home. Perhaps with your city council, maybe your local newspaper. Maybe it begins with the school board. Every brand of trust begins locally and spreads out to the communities. Because we can trust the institutions closest to us, or in this case, if we cannot, how can we ever expect to trust the ones thousands of miles away? Think about it. The same brand of trust you put on your local alderman, you have to put in the president. Maybe that's why today's conversation isn't just about America. Whether you're watching from Oregon, Ontario, Ocean City, perhaps you're viewing us from across the Atlantic in the UK. This isn't an American idea. It's a human one. Every free society has to decide what public service should mean, what accountability should look like. Every community has to decide whether or not trust is something that's expected or it's something that's earned. Maybe that's why the debate over free speech, transparency, and leadership isn't confined to just one nation. The decisions made in one place can influence conversations far beyond even their own borders. People running YouTube know that all too well today. Public service was never intended to create a separate class of people. It was meant to serve the public. A free nation doesn't ask its citizens to trust blindly. It asks its institutions to earn that trust. And maybe, just maybe, that's the conversation worth having. Because the American dream is always dependent on people believing that service, believing that opportunity, and believing that by sheer logic, it should belong to everyone. So I'm not just having this video to have this conversation, blind faith with nothing in return. I'd like to hear from you, not just your opinion, but your experience as well. What in your mind has happened near you and what has earned your trust? And if that's in question, what would it take to restore it? Because whether you're watching here in the United States or from somewhere around the world elsewhere, every great community, every nation is ultimately built the same way. Around here, it's built one conversation at a time. Till that continues, the story continues.